In the spring of 1947, Bedouin shepherds stumbled into the limestone caves of Qumran, shattering the silence of the Judean desert and unknowingly cracking open the greatest theological fault line in modern history. The world celebrated the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls as a monumental triumph for biblical preservation. The media marveled at the ancient copies of Isaiah and the Psalms, older by a millennium than any previously known Hebrew manuscripts. But behind the closed doors of antiquities departments and theological seminaries, a different, far more unsettling conversation was taking place. Because among the pristine scrolls of the canonical prophets, the archaeologists found something else. They found fragmented copies of a text that was never supposed to be there, a book whose sheer presence in those caves posed a terrifying threat to the established religious order of both Judaism and early Christianity. 15 separate scrolls of a single, suppressed document were pulled from the dust. To put that into perspective, that is more copies than the Book of Joshua, more than the Book of Judges, more than the Book of Kings. The Essenes, the ascetic Jewish sect that guarded this desert library, did not merely read this book as secondary literature, they revered it. They based their entire cosmic and earthly reality upon its strict regulations. This text did not just echo the book of Genesis, it overwrote it. It claimed a terrifyingly higher authority. It is known to history as the Book of Jubilees, or the Lesser Genesis. But there is absolutely nothing lesser about it. The ancient text claims to be the direct, unfiltered dictation of the secret history of the world, spoken not by mortal prophets, but by an entity identified in the original Hebrew as the Malach ha-Panim. The ancient texts do not describe a being of soft light. This is the angel of the presence, an emissary of unfathomable authority, standing within the immediate, unshielded radiation of the divine throne room, carrying orders that govern the architecture of time and space. According to its own opening lines, the Book of Jubilees was given to Moses on Mount Sinai, not merely to provide ethical laws for wandering Israelites, but to reveal the hidden, terrifying mechanics of the universe. It exposes the exact names and lineages of the fallen watchers, the dark origins of demonic spirits wandering the earth, and an inflexible, mathematically perfect solar calendar dictated by heaven itself. It presents a reality where time is not a fluid human construct, but a rigid divine mechanism. Think of it as an immense cosmic clockwork where every feast, every Sabbath, and every passing year is locked into place by immutable spiritual laws. To alter this calendar by even a single fraction of a day was not an administrative error. It was an act of cosmic treason. It was the severing of a blood contract with the divine, a literal misalignment of the earth that would grant the lingering spirits of the Nephilim legal jurisdiction to unleash chaos upon human history. For centuries, the religious elite of antiquity sought to erase the Book of Jubilees from the minds of the faithful. It was deliberately and systematically excluded from the canonical Hebrew Bible. It was shunned by the architects of the Christian New Testament. The original Hebrew manuscripts were left to rot in the desert, the text surviving the purges of history only in the translation of the ancient Ge'ez language, heavily guarded by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, far beyond the reach of Western ecclesiastical censors. The question that has haunted biblical scholars and investigative theologians is not merely why this text was written, but why it was so aggressively and fearfully buried. What was contained within its archaic mandates that terrified the rabbinic authorities of the first century? Why did the architects of our modern religious institutions decide that you were never meant to read the exact words spoken by the angel of the presence? The answers hidden within the fragments of Jubilees do not just challenge our understanding of ancient history, they threaten to dismantle the very foundations of how we perceive biblical authority, the origins of evil, and the divine measurement of time itself. If you seek the hidden truths of the ancient world, subscribe and join us in this investigation. Because to understand the suppression of this ancient mechanism, we must first look at the very men who decided what God was allowed to say and the exact moment the cosmic clock was intentionally broken. To understand the burial of the Book of Jubilees, we must first shatter the sanitized, comfortable illusion of how the biblical text arrived in the modern era. The contemporary Western mind is conditioned to view the scriptures as a neatly packaged library, bound in fine leather, handed down through the centuries with pristine, uninterrupted clarity. This is an anachronistic fantasy. The reality of ancient text transmission, particularly during the tumultuous centuries of the Second Temple period, was a violent, politically charged battleground, where the stakes were not merely theological disagreements, but the very survival of humanity against the encroaching forces of darkness. We project our modern sensibilities onto an ancient Near Eastern world that operated under entirely different laws of physics and spiritual reality. We read the texts as moral allegories or historical records. The ancients read them as binding legal documents, cosmic architecture, and battlefield intelligence. In the centuries leading up to the birth of Christ, Judaism was not a monolith. It was fractured into deeply hostile sects, each fighting for the spiritual soul of Israel under the crushing weight of foreign occupations. The Persians, the Greeks, and eventually the Romans did not just conquer the land. They sought to conquer the mind and the divine rhythm of the people. And at the absolute center of this existential war was the concept of time. To the modern individual, a calendar is merely a pragmatic tool to organize labor, schedule holidays, and track the passing of seasons. It is arbitrary. But to the ancient Hebrew mind, specifically the strict theological tradition that produced the Book of Jubilees, time was not a human invention. Time was a divine emanation. The original Hebrew texts use the word moedim. English translations often render this weekly as feasts or festivals, implying a cultural gathering or a religious party. But the conceptual weight of the word moedim is far more severe. It translates to an appointed time, but in the context of ancient Near Eastern covenantal theology, it means a synchronized intersection of dimensions. A moed is a specific, mathematically calculated moment where the boundaries between the visible earthly realm and the invisible divine throne room become utterly permeable. These are the precise moments when the angelic hosts and the earthly priesthood are meant to execute the exact same ritual simultaneously. It is the architecture of a cosmic courtroom. If the earthly priests offer the blood of atonement at the exact calculated moment of the moed, the sacrifice aligns with the heavenly temple, the spiritual contract is ratified, and the protective barrier around humanity is sustained. If the timing is off, even by a fraction of a degree, the ritual is performed into an empty void, the blood is wasted, the contract is breached, and the jurisdiction over the earth defaults to the rogue spiritual entities waiting in the shadows. This is the central, terrifying thesis of the Book of Jubilees. It outlines an inflexible, perfectly symmetrical solar calendar consisting of exactly 364 days. In this divine mathematical system, the year is perfectly divisible by 7. There are exactly 52 weeks. The festivals, the moedim, always fall on the exact same day of the week, every single year, for all of eternity. It is a closed, perfect loop of sacred time, mirroring the unchangeable perfection of the Creator. Jubilees explicitly commands that humanity must adhere to this solar mechanism, because the angels of the presence and the angels of sanctification observe it in the heavenly realms. But history took a darker turn. In the 2nd century before Christ, the Seleucid Greek Empire, under the mad king Antiochus Epiphanes, swept through Jerusalem with a deliberate campaign to annihilate the Jewish religion. Antiochus did not just slaughter pigs on the altar. He understood that to destroy the spiritual infrastructure of a people, you must destroy their measurement of time. He outlawed the observance of the Sabbath and forced the adoption of the Hellenistic lunar calendar. The lunar calendar is chaotic. It requires constant human observation, the spotting of the new moon, and the arbitrary insertion of leap months to keep it aligned with the agricultural seasons. It shifts. It wanders. It places the authority of time into the hands of mortal men who gaze at the sky, rather than resting it upon the immutable mechanics of the sun, as dictated by God. The Maccabean revolt violently threw off the Greek occupation, but the spiritual damage was catastrophic and irreversible. The dynasty that arose from the ashes, the Hasmoneans, usurped the high priesthood, the legitimate unbroken lineage of the Zadokite priests, the only men authorized by ancient covenant to handle the heavy, lethal radioactivity of the Holy of Holies, were ousted. The new regime, driven by political pragmatism and the need to unify a fractured nation, permanently adopted the Greek-influenced lunar calendar. They compromised the cosmic clock. For the theological purists, this was not a mere difference in tradition. It was an apocalyptic disaster. The Essenes, the guardians of the Dead Sea Scrolls, looked at the rebuilt temple in Jerusalem and saw an abomination. They believed the new priesthood was illegitimate and, more terrifyingly, that they were operating on the wrong timeline. By sacrificing on the wrong days, the priests in Jerusalem were inadvertently opening spiritual portals to the wrong entities. The Essenes fled to the desolate landscape of Qumran, taking the Book of Jubilees with them. They isolated themselves in the desert, rigorously keeping the 364-day solar calendar, believing that they were the last remaining anchor holding the shattered pieces of the divine covenant together. They prepared for a cosmic war, waiting for the day when the angels of heaven would descend to eradicate the polluted priesthood that had plunged the world into temporal darkness. When the Roman legions annihilated Jerusalem and burned the Second Temple to the ground in the year 70 of the Common Era, the theological landscape shifted again, violently. The physical center of worship was gone. The Sadducees and the Essenes were virtually wiped out. The only major sect to survive and restructure the remnants of the faith were the Pharisees, the architects of what would become rabbinic Judaism. For the rabbis gathering at the Council of Yavne, survival was the ultimate imperative. They needed absolute uniformity. They needed a system that could be practiced in exile, without a physical temple, relying on community observation and the rabbinic authority to declare the new moons. The Book of Jubilees posed a fatal threat to this new rabbinic order. It explicitly condemned the lunar calendar they had embraced. It cursed anyone who observed the wandering moon, stating clearly that they would forget the days of the covenant and walk in the feasts of the Gentiles, adopting their errors and their ignorance. The text warned that by losing the exact measurement of sacred time, humanity would become blind to the movements of the spiritual realm. The rabbis could not allow a text of such commanding authority to circulate among the masses, preaching that the current religious leadership was legally illegitimate and spiritually compromised. So, Jubilees was deliberately marginalized. It was excluded from the standardized Hebrew canon. It was branded as dangerous sectarian literature. The emerging Christian church, initially a Jewish sect, inherited this complex theological trauma. But as it spread into the Gentile world, it completely detached itself from the ancient Jewish calendrical wars. The early church fathers, steeped in Greek philosophy and Roman administrative structures, eventually aligned themselves with the Julian and later the Gregorian calendars. The intricate, terrifyingly precise cosmic mathematics of the Book of Jubilees became completely alien to the Western Christian mind. The concept of a solar calendar dictated by an angel to Moses on a burning mountain sounded more like mythology than binding theology, and the text was allowed to slip into the shadows of history, preserved only by isolated communities at the very edges of the known world. But when we pull back the layers of this historical suppression, we find that the dispute over a calendar is merely the surface of a much deeper, far more terrifying abyss. The authors of Jubilees were not obsessed with days and months for the sake of pedantic administration. They were obsessed with time because time is the only parameter that governs the containment of an ancient evil. The Book of Jubilees explicitly details the legal mechanics of the spiritual realm, mapping out exactly how the boundaries between dimensions were established after the catastrophic events of the flood. It introduces the concept of an ongoing, highly structured spiritual war that did not end with the drowning of the ancient world. In the canonical Genesis narrative, the flood wipes out the physical bodies of the Nephilim, the monstrous offspring of the rebellious Watchers and human women, and the text moves quickly forward to the repopulation of the earth. But Jubilees reveals a haunting legal complication. The physical bodies of the giants were destroyed, but their spirits, born of an unnatural, illicit union between the immortal and the mortal, could not be completely annihilated. They were bound to the earth, formless, ravenous, and legally permitted to exist within certain boundaries. Jubilees introduces a figure absent from the canonical Torah, a commanding entity of the dark realm known as Mastema. The name is not a mere title. Its conceptual root translates roughly to animosity, accusation, and deeply entrenched hostility. Mastema is the chief of the spirits, the prosecutor of the divine court who stands before the throne of God to demand his legal rights. According to Jubilees, after the flood, Noah prayed desperately for the complete removal of these predatory spirits, knowing they would corrupt his descendants. God commanded the angels to bind all the evil spirits in the place of condemnation. But Mastema intervened. He approached the divine throne and argued a terrifying legal precedent. He claimed that a portion of these spirits must be left under his command, because the wickedness of humanity was so great that he required an army to execute judgment, to deceive, and to punish the guilty. The chilling reality presented in the text is that God agreed to this term. A divine compromise was struck. A tenth of the malignant spirits were allowed to remain roaming the earth, legally authorized to operate within the shadows of human error, while the other 9/10 were imprisoned in the abyss. This is where the obsessive, rigid adherence to the 364-day solar calendar becomes a matter of absolute survival. The calendar is not a schedule, it is a defensive grid. The Moedim, the appointed times, are the exact moments when the spiritual shields are reinforced through synchronized earthly and heavenly obedience. By abandoning the solar calendar, by wandering into the chaotic observation of the lunar cycle, humanity effectively dismantled its own protective infrastructure. By shifting the days of the feasts, the ancient priests stopped showing up to the divine appointments. The sacrifices were made on empty days, unreceived by the heavenly temple. The spiritual contract was rendered null and void. In the eyes of the Essenes and the authors of Jubilees, the world was no longer under the direct, synchronized protection of the divine mechanism. The clock had been shattered, and in the resulting temporal chaos, the barriers between the realms collapsed. Mastema and his legion of lingering spirits were granted unrestricted access to the timeline of humanity. The suppression of the Book of Jubilees was not just the censorship of a rival religious ideology. It was the deliberate burial of a warning label on the machinery of the universe, hiding the horrifying fact that the protective systems had been taken offline, leaving humanity completely exposed to the invisible architects of chaos who understood exactly how to manipulate the fractured measurement of time. To fully grasp the magnitude of what was hidden from the world, we must step away from the polished pulpits of modern theology and descend into the suffocating darkness of Cave 4 at Qumran. Imagine the air in that limestone vault, thick with the dust of 2 millennia, undisturbed since the Roman legions marched across the Judean desert to slaughter the last guardians of this esoteric library. When the archaeologists carefully unrolled the carbonized, brittle fragments categorized as 4Q Jubilees, they were not looking at a mere commentary. They were looking at a weaponized text. The scribes who copied these words did so with a meticulous, terrifying reverence. The ink, crafted from carbon black and gallnuts, was pressed into the leather not to tell a story, but to record the absolute, unyielding architecture of the universe. When you open the canonical book of Genesis, you are met with a majestic yet incredibly sparse overview of creation. It is a text stripped of its mechanics, offering a comforting, simplified narrative for humanity. Genesis states that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But the Book of Jubilees shatters this simplicity immediately. It takes you behind the veil of the physical universe, into the terrifying, blinding radiation of the first microsecond of existence. According to the exact dictation given by the angel of the presence, the physical earth was essentially an afterthought. The primary act of creation, the very first things spoken into existence on day 1, were the invisible, catastrophic forces of the spiritual hierarchy. The original Hebrew texts found in the Dead Sea Library do not describe angels as the winged, benevolent guardians depicted in Renaissance art. The text uses terms that convey raw, elemental terror. It speaks of the creation of the spirits of the face, the spirits of sanctification, the angels of the spirit of fire, and the angels of the spirit of the winds. These are not people with wings. They are conscious, sentient forces of nature. They are the underlying physics of the universe, granted terrifying intellect and absolute obedience. When the ancient text uses the word for spirit, ruach, it is not speaking of a ghost. It is speaking of a violent, invisible pressure, a blast of wind that can shatter cedars, or a breath that animates dead clay. To stand in the presence of these entities is to stand before the localized epicenter of a hurricane. Jubilees reveals that this massive, intricate hierarchy of elemental intelligences was already fully operational before the Earth was even formed. They were the witnesses to the structuring of the cosmos. And it is here, in the deep antiquity of the ancient timeline, that Jubilees provides a shocking reinterpretation of the darkest chapter in human history, the descent of the Watchers. The canonical Genesis narrative, specifically chapter 6, condenses the fall of the angels into a few brief cryptic verses. It simply states that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, producing a race of giants known as the Nephilim. It implies a sudden, lustful rebellion. But the Book of Jubilees, drawing from the same ancient tradition as the Book of Enoch, expands this event into a staggering, multi-generational tragedy that fundamentally alters our understanding of the divine plan. The ancient Aramaic and Hebrew manuscripts refer to these beings as the Irin. To translate this simply as Watchers strips the word of its militaristic dread. The Irin are the sentinels. They are the unsleeping ones, entities designed with eyes that never close, tasked with the relentless surveillance of the cosmic borders. Jubilees records a detail that was utterly erased from the orthodox biblical canon. It states that these angels did not initially fall from heaven in an act of cosmic treason. They were dispatched. They were sent down to earth by God himself during the days of Jared. Their mission was explicitly sanctioned: to instruct the children of men, to teach them judgment, and to guide primitive humanity into a state of divine order. This detail is devastating. It means that the greatest catastrophe in the history of the world began as a divine initiative. The Watchers descended in absolute purity, walking among early humanity not as conquerors, but as celestial instructors. They taught the movements of the stars, the mathematics of the calendar, and the laws of the universe. But in their proximity to the heavy, dense reality of human flesh, something within their immortal architecture fractured. The text describes how they observed the daughters of men, and a foreign, impossible mutation infected their spiritual nature. They abandoned their holy stations, violated the impenetrable barrier between the eternal and the mortal, and took human women for themselves. The resulting offspring, the Nephilim, were not merely tall men. They were biological paradoxes, localized tears in the fabric of creation. They possessed the immortal, ravenous appetites of their angelic fathers, trapped within the dense, consuming biology of their human mothers. Jubilees meticulously catalogs the resulting nightmare. It wasn't just that the giants were violent. It was that their very existence demanded a caloric intake that the earth could not sustain. They consumed the yields of humanity, and when the food ran out, they turned on mankind. And when mankind was decimated, they turned on the animals, the birds, the reptiles, and the fish. The text of Jubilees introduces a terrifying concept of genetic and spiritual contamination that goes far beyond simple moral corruption. It states that all flesh corrupted its way upon the earth. This wasn't just humanity sinning. The Watchers, possessing the deep foundational knowledge of the biological universe, began to illegally mix the species. They spliced the fundamental codes of creation, merging animals with other animals, crossing boundaries that were established on the days of Genesis. The ancient world became a horrific mutated landscape of biological abominations, unauthorized flesh that God never intended to exist. And then, the earth itself began to scream. Jubilees records that the innocent blood spilled by the Nephilim soaked into the ground, and the earth brought forth a legal accusation against the heavens. The cries of the slaughtered did not merely rise as sound. They rose as a binding legal petition to the divine throne room. The angels of the presence, observing the slaughter from the firmament, were forced to present this evidence to the Creator. The resulting flood was not a sudden fit of divine rage. In the theology of Jubilees, the deluge was a calculated, necessary sterilization of a planet that had been biologically and spiritually weaponized against the divine order. But as we established earlier, the physical destruction of the flood did not solve the spiritual problem. It only mutated it. When the Nephilim drowned, their spirits were released from their monstrous bodies, but because they were born of a hybrid, unauthorized union, these spirits had nowhere to go. They could not ascend to the heavenly realms, and they could not return to the dust. They became the demons of the ancient world, invisible, hungry, and full of malice. It is here that Jubilees introduces a chapter of human history completely absent from your Bible, a chapter that explains the true origin of ancient medicine and the ongoing, invisible biological warfare waged against humanity. In the 10th chapter of Jubilees, after the floodwaters had receded and the earth was beginning to repopulate, the grandchildren of Noah began to suffer terrifying, inexplicable afflictions. They were struck by sudden blindness, internal hemorrhaging, and fatal diseases. They were being hunted. The lingering, invisible spirits of the Nephilim, operating under the command of Prince Mastema, had begun their authorized campaign of torment. Noah, watching his descendants being slaughtered by an invisible enemy, did not merely pray for comfort. He invoked a massive, legal appeal to the throne of God. He argued that these malignant spirits were operating beyond their permitted boundaries. In response, God did not remove the demons. He had already signed the treaty with Mastema, allowing 10% of them to remain. Instead, God sent an intervention team. He dispatched the supreme angels of the presence to teach Noah the specific hidden chemical properties of the earth's flora. This is a monumental revelation. In the theology of Jubilees, the origins of pharmacology and herbal medicine are not the result of human trial and error. They are classified angelic military intelligence. The angels dictated to Noah a comprehensive medical text, a book of remedies detailing exactly which roots, which herbs, and which chemical compounds could specifically neutralize the biological attacks of the demonic realm. Noah recorded this knowledge in a book and passed it down to his son Shem. The implication is staggering. Ancient medicine was not just about healing the physical body. It was an active form of exorcism, a chemical defense mechanism against the unauthorized interference of dark entities. The strictness of these ancient laws, particularly regarding blood, now takes on a terrifying, pragmatic logic. In the Book of Leviticus, the prohibition against consuming blood is stated as a dietary law, but in Jubilees, the consumption of blood is treated as a cosmic felony, an act that immediately severs the soul from the protective covenant. To the authors of Jubilees, blood is not merely a biological fluid. It is the physical containment field for the nephesh, the animating soul. It is the very currency of the spiritual realm. When the ancient sacrifices were performed correctly, the blood was poured out on the altar, serving as a metaphysical bridge, an encrypted data stream directly to the heavenly temple. To consume it, to drink the blood of an animal, was to illegally ingest the soul of a lower creature, mutating your own spiritual signature and making you instantly recognizable to the predatory spirits waiting in the dark. This intense, suffocating legalism is the beating heart of the Book of Jubilees. Everything is categorized, everything is measured. The text repeatedly references an artifact of terrifying implications, the heavenly tablets, the Lucho Hashamayim. Throughout the narrative, the angel of the presence justifies the laws by declaring that they are already written and engraved on the heavenly tablets. This is not a metaphor for God's memory. The ancient writers envisioned a literal, celestial database, a permanent, unalterable inscription of all history, all law, and all destiny. In the worldview of Jubilees, history is not unfolding, it is merely being executed. The future is already a fixed, solidified reality in the higher dimensions. Every transgression, every judgment, the exact date of every empire's fall, and the specific appointed time for the final apocalyptic war are already carved into the architecture of heaven. This creates an atmosphere of terrifying predestination. The purpose of human existence is not to forge a new destiny, but to desperately align oneself with the flawless, unforgiving mathematics of what has already been written. To deviate from the written law is not just to make a moral error, it is to crash into the immovable walls of reality itself. Perhaps the most chilling example of this cosmic rigidity and the most dramatic alteration of a well-known biblical story is found in the narrative of Abraham. In the 22nd chapter of Genesis, the text bluntly states that God tested Abraham, commanding him to take his beloved son, Isaac, to the land of Moriah and offer him as a burnt sacrifice. It is a story that has haunted theologians for centuries, presenting a terrifying portrait of a deity demanding the ultimate brutal proof of loyalty. But the Book of Jubilees, accessing a hidden, parallel tradition, completely rewrites the mechanics of this event. It reveals that the command to sacrifice Isaac did not originate in the mind of God. It originated in the prosecution of the divine court. Jubilees places us in heaven in the exact moment before the terrifying command is given. The angels are praising Abraham, declaring him faithful in all his trials. But Prince Mastema, the chief of the demonic spirits, the eternal accuser, steps forward into the localized light of the throne. He issues a formal legal challenge to the Creator. Mastema argues that Abraham's faith is untested in the one area that truly matters. He accuses Abraham of loving Isaac more than he loves the divine law. Mastema demands that God require the life of the boy, predicting that Abraham will finally break, that he will refuse the command, and that his legal standing as the father of the covenant will be permanently nullified. In Jubilees, the most agonizing trial of faith in human history is revealed to be a high-stakes proxy war between the absolute sovereignty of God and the calculated malice of the chief demon. When Abraham raises the knife over his bound son, he has no idea that he is participating in a cosmic wager. He does not know that Prince Mastema is standing invisibly at the altar, watching, waiting for the patriarch's hand to tremble, waiting for the exact moment the covenant shatters so he can legally claim dominion over the bloodline of Israel. And when the angel of the presence finally screams from the heavens to stop the blade, Jubilees notes a detail that changes everything. It says that Mastema was put to shame. The entire architecture of ancient biblical history, when viewed through the dark, cracked lens of the Book of Jubilees, transforms into an active, terrifying crime scene. The patriarchs are not merely nomadic shepherds. They are highly trained spiritual operatives, navigating a world heavily occupied by hostile, invisible forces. Every altar built, every drop of blood spilled, every strict observance of the solar Sabbath was a tactical maneuver in a war for the legal jurisdiction of the earth. But as the centuries passed and the brutal machinations of empires ground the ancient traditions to dust, the explicit knowledge of this cosmic battlefield was systematically buried. The religious authorities of the Common Era, seeking stability and control, could not handle a theology that portrayed the heavens as a highly bureaucratic courtroom where demons held legal rights, and where a single mathematical error in the calendar could unleash hell on earth. They locked the Book of Jubilees away. They smoothed out the rough, terrifying edges of the divine narrative, presenting a sanitized God and a manageable universe. Yet, the suppression of the text did not cancel the laws it described. The heavenly tablets were not erased simply because humanity stopped reading them. If the Book of Jubilees is not the fictional rambling of an isolated desert cult, but the actual, unauthorized leak of the universe's source code, then the implications for our modern reality are devastating. It means that for the last 2,000 years, humanity has been operating blindly in a hostile environment, completely ignorant of the spiritual physics that govern our existence. It means that the calendar we follow, the festivals we celebrate, and the very rhythm of our lives are completely out of synchronization with the heavenly temple. We have been walking through a minefield without a map, assuming that the silence from the heavens is a sign of peace. But in the cold, unrelenting logic of the ancient world, silence does not mean the war is over. It means the enemy has already won the high ground, and the defensive grids have been offline for millennia. We are left standing in the ruins of a broken clock, completely unaware of what is moving toward us in the dark. When the architects of the early Christian church began the monumental task of consolidating a scattered, heavily persecuted sect into a unified global religion, they encountered a terrifying theological impasse. They were not merely fighting a physical war against the Roman lions or the imperial executioners. They were fighting an intellectual war for the very definition of reality. As Christianity spread beyond the borders of the Levant and penetrated the philosophical strongholds of Greece and Rome, it underwent a profound psychological mutation. The men who would become the church fathers, figures like Irenaeus, Augustine, and Jerome, were highly educated in Hellenistic philosophy. They possessed brilliant minds trained in the academies of Athens and Alexandria, steeped in the concepts of Plato and Aristotle. They envisioned a God who was the unmoved mover, a deity of pure intellect, an immaterial, static perfection dwelling in an abstract realm of pure thought. But when they opened the ancient Hebrew scrolls of the Second Temple period, particularly the Book of Jubilees. They were confronted with a cosmic architecture that horrified their refined philosophical sensibilities. The God presented in the text of Jubilees is not a distant, passive intellect. He is the terrifying, active sovereign of a heavily militarized, bureaucratic, and shockingly physical, unseen realm. The heavens described by the angel of the presence are not a peaceful expanse of floating clouds. They are a roaring, blindingly complex command center. There are courts, ledgers, legal prosecutors, authorized executioners, and a meticulously structured hierarchy of elemental forces that govern the very physics of the material world. To the Greek-trained theologians of the early church, this ancient Hebrew worldview was deeply uncomfortable. It was too visceral. It was too legalistic. It suggested that the divine realm operated under a strict, unforgiving set of protocols and biological boundaries that humanity was constantly, often unknowingly, violating. This collision of worldviews created the ultimate doctrinal paradox. The leaders of the emerging Orthodox Church realized that if they accepted the Book of Jubilees as divinely inspired scripture, it would utterly dismantle the theological foundation they were desperately trying to build for the masses. To understand the severity of this threat, we must examine the most fundamental pillar of Western Christian theology: the origin of evil and the doctrine of original sin. In the standardized, canonical tradition that you were taught to believe, the origin of all human suffering and spiritual death is pinned entirely on a single moment of moral failure in the Garden of Eden. The eating of the forbidden fruit is presented as the singular catalyst that fractured creation. In this framework, evil is a human problem, born of human disobedience, requiring human repentance. It places the burden of the broken world squarely on the shoulders of mankind. This is a neat, manageable theology. It allows religious institutions to build a structure of guilt, redemption, and ecclesiastical authority. But the Book of Jubilees fundamentally rejects this simplified narrative. It acknowledges the transgression of Adam and Eve, but it treats their expulsion from the garden merely as a tragic prologue. According to the hidden text, the true apocalyptic corruption of the earth, the event that irreparably poisoned the genetic and spiritual well of humanity, was not a moral choice made by humans. It was an unauthorized, biological invasion by the Watchers. This creates a terrifying doctrinal crisis. If the origin of systemic evil, disease, bloodshed, and demonic torment is rooted in the illicit genetic tampering by immortal beings, then humanity is not merely a race of guilty sinners. We are the victims of a cosmic war crime. We are collateral damage in a rebellion that originated in the highest echelons of the angelic military hierarchy. The authors of Jubilees argue that the overwhelming darkness of the human experience is not solely the result of our own flawed hearts. It is the direct consequence of the rogue spirits of the Nephilim, the demonic remnants, being legally permitted to remain on earth under the command of Prince Mastema. For theologians like Augustine, whose entire framework of salvation depended on the absolute moral culpability of humanity, this text was a radiological hazard. If demons were legally authorized by a divine compromise to hunt humans, to inflict blindness, to cause miscarriages, and to sow geopolitical chaos, then the Church could not simply preach moral improvement. They would have to acknowledge that the earth was an active, hostile occupation zone, governed by legal treaties signed in heaven before the flood. They would have to admit that simply being a good person was entirely insufficient to protect oneself from the predatory physics of the unseen world. The early church required a theology of free will to justify the concepts of hell and eternal judgment. A man must be completely free to choose his damnation, otherwise God is a tyrant. But the Book of Jubilees introduces a concept that strikes a fatal blow to the illusion of absolute human agency: the Lucho ha-Shamayim, the heavenly tablets. As the angel of the presence dictates the hidden history of the world to Moses, he repeatedly references these celestial ledgers. He does not say that God foresees the future. He states definitively that the future is already written, engraved and finalized on the tablets before the events even occur in the physical dimension. The exact dates of empires rising, the specific sins of the patriarchs, the judgments that will fall upon the wicked, and the final eschatological climax of history are treated as a completed manuscript. This is not mere omniscience. This is absolute, unyielding determinism. Imagine the universe not as an open-ended story, but as a colossal, hyper-complex mechanical clock winding down to a predetermined 0 hour. Every human life, every national tragedy, every act of betrayal or heroism is simply a gear turning exactly as it was machined to turn by the celestial architects. To the ancient Essenes guarding this text, this predestination was actually a source of dark comfort. They believed the world was utterly corrupt, run by illegitimate priests and demonic overlords, but the heavenly tablets assured them that the apocalypse was scheduled, mathematically guaranteed, and could not be delayed by the actions of men. But to the bishops of Rome and Constantinople, trying to convert an empire, the doctrine of the heavenly tablets was a nightmare. How do you convince a Roman pagan to repent and change his ways if he suspects his destiny is already carved in stone in a higher dimension? How do you establish the authority of bishops and priests to forgive sins if the verdict was sealed before the foundation of the earth? The rigid, terrifying predestination of Jubilees threatened to paralyze the evangelistic machinery of the early church. It removed the leverage of moral choice and replaced it with a cold, terrifying awe of divine mechanics. Therefore, a systematic campaign of theological suppression was initiated. The text could not simply be ignored. It had to be actively marginalized and delegitimized. The word apocrypha, which originally meant hidden or esoteric, implying that the texts were too sacred or dangerous for the uninitiated masses, was weaponized. The church councils slowly changed the definition of the word. Apocryphal came to mean spurious, false, heretical, and forbidden. The Book of Jubilees was stripped of its divine authority, downgraded from the direct dictation of the angel of the presence to the status of dangerous Jewish myth. Yet, the most catastrophic consequence of this doctrinal burial was not the loss of a historical narrative. It was the complete dismantling of the cosmic defensive grid. We must return to the central, obsessive theme of Jubilees, the 364-day solar calendar. The early Christian church, in its aggressive attempt to separate itself from its Jewish origins and assimilate into the Roman Empire, permanently abandoned the ancient Hebrew measurement of time. The Council of Nicaea in the year 325 finalized the divorce, declaring that the church would no longer calculate its sacred festivals based on the Jewish calendar. They aligned the resurrection of Christ, Easter, with the complex shifting calculations of the spring equinox and the lunar cycle, while adopting the Julian solar calendar for civil administration. To the modern mind, this seems like a pragmatic administrative decision. But viewed through the terrifying lens of the Book of Jubilees, the Council of Nicaea committed cosmic treason. They permanently broke the modim, the appointed times. Remember that in the ancient theology, time is a physical intersection of dimensions. The festivals are not memorials. They are synchronized rituals designed to align the earthly realm with the heavenly throne room. By abandoning the exact mathematical precision of the 364-day solar calendar, the global church essentially unplugged the spiritual shielding of the planet. They began performing their sacraments, their prayers, and their rituals on the wrong days, at the wrong times. They were broadcasting on a frequency that heaven was no longer monitoring. This is the ultimate doctrinal paradox, the hidden battle that has raged in the unseen realm for 2 millennia. The modern church operates under the assumption that the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ completely nullified the ancient, terrifying legalities of the spiritual realm. They preach that grace has replaced the law and that the bureaucratic nightmare of demonic jurisdiction was abolished at the cross. But the Book of Jubilees whispers a far more sinister reality from the dust of Qumran. It suggests that while the ultimate victory may have been secured, the physical mechanics of the universe were never altered. The legal treaty forged between God and Prince Mastema after the flood was never officially revoked. 10% of the demonic host is still authorized to operate. The boundaries of the spiritual dimensions are still governed by the precise, unchanging mathematics of the heavenly tablets. And because the modern religious institutions threw away the operating manual, because they buried the exact names of the angels, the chemical defenses taught to Noah, and the perfect solar synchronization of the calendar, humanity is fighting a multi-dimensional war completely blind. We have replaced the terrifying, exact science of ancient spiritual warfare with emotional worship and philosophical debates. We build massive cathedrals and hold global prayer events, unaware that in the rigid, hyper-legalistic courts of the heavenly realm, an incorrectly timed ritual is not merely ineffective. It is an open invitation for accusation. Mastema, the great prosecutor, does not care about human sincerity. He cares about jurisdiction. He cares about legal technicalities. When a modern believer suffers inexplicable tragedy, systemic illness, or catastrophic mental fragmentation, Orthodox theology rushes to offer platitudes about the mysterious will of God or the redemptive power of suffering. But the ancient authors of Jubilees would view this entirely differently. They would see a breach in the perimeter. They would recognize the signature of the lingering spirits of the Nephilim, exploiting a legal loophole created by humanity's ignorance of the cosmic calendar. They would not offer a comforting sermon. They would demand to know how the bloodlines had been compromised, which ancient boundary had been crossed, and why the protective rituals were not executed at the exact mathematical moment dictated by the stars. This hidden battle is not a metaphor for internal psychological struggles. In the framework of Jubilees, this is a literal, objective reality. There are invisible entities crowding the airspace of our cities, deeply resentful of human biology, constantly searching for the legally permissible cracks in our reality. They feed on the chaos generated by a world operating out of sync with the divine rhythm. Every time a society engages in the unauthorized mixing of genetics, every time the sacred boundaries of blood and flesh are violated, and every time the measurement of time is manipulated by human arrogance, an alarm sounds in the unseen realm. The heavenly tablets record the infraction, and the prosecution is granted temporary access to the physical plane. The early church fathers sought to protect their followers from the overwhelming terror of this cosmic bureaucracy. They wanted to present a universe governed by a loving Father, not an inflexible mathematical matrix guarded by terrifying elemental entities. But in their attempt to shield humanity from the harsh radiation of the ancient Hebrew worldview, they disarmed us. They locked the armor in a vault, burned the maps of the minefield, and convinced generations of believers that the invisible predators hunting them in the dark were nothing more than psychological shadows or the simple consequences of bad choices. This doctrinal paradox leaves the modern intellectual standing at the edge of a terrifying abyss. If the fragments found in the Dead Sea caves are the authentic, unfiltered dictation of the angel of the presence, then almost everything we have been taught about the mechanics of salvation, the origin of our suffering, and the nature of divine time is a carefully constructed illusion. The comforting doctrines of Western theology are exposed as fragile, paper-thin walls built over the ruins of a massive, ancient, and terrifyingly active spiritual machinery. And as the modern world rapidly accelerates toward the intentional manipulation of human biology, the alteration of genetic codes, and the total abandonment of natural order, we are unknowingly replicating the exact conditions that summoned the flood. We are pressing the very buttons on the cosmic console that the Watchers pressed in the days of Jared, entirely unaware that the alarms are already sounding in the highest courts of heaven, and the sentinels of the presence are preparing their response. To understand the prophetic magnitude of what is currently unfolding in our modern era, we must unlock the very title of the suppressed text. The Book of Jubilees is not merely a historical retrospective. It is an eschatological blueprint, a hyper-detailed architectural schematic of the apocalypse. In the canonical book of Leviticus, the concept of the Jubilee is introduced as an economic and agricultural law. Every 49 years, at the completion of 7 cycles of 7 years, a trumpet is blown. In the 50th year, the Jubilee is declared. All debts are instantaneously canceled. All slaves are emancipated. And most importantly, all land that had been sold or leased automatically reverts back to its original, rightful owner. It is a total, unyielding, systemic reset. But the angel of the presence did not dictate the Book of Jubilees to Moses simply to manage the agricultural real estate of ancient Israel. The text elevates the concept of the Jubilee from a local agrarian law to a terrifying, macrocosmic mechanism. According to the heavenly tablets, the entire span of human history, from the moment the first atomic structures were spoken into existence to the final, catastrophic unmaking of the heavens, is mathematically divided into exact Jubilee cycles. History is not an open-ended narrative of human progress. It is a strictly finite lease. The Earth, legally speaking, is a contested territory currently occupied by unauthorized squatters. When Adam surrendered his dominion, and when the treaty was struck after the flood to allow Prince Mastema and 10% of the disembodied Nephilim spirits to remain on the Earth, a cosmic lease was signed. But a lease has an expiration date. The terrifying reality hidden within the mathematics of Jubilees is that the final Jubilee, the ultimate cosmic reset, is an inescapable, predetermined date carved into the unalterable stone of the higher dimensions. The apocalypse is not contingent upon human readiness. It is not waiting for humanity to reach a certain level of depravity or a certain level of enlightenment. It is an algorithmic certainty. It is a celestial combination lock clicking relentlessly towards zero, driven by the turning gears of the solar calendar. And this is where the suppression of the ancient solar calendar becomes a matter of apocalyptic blindness. Because the early religious institutions abandoned the 364-day synchronization, humanity lost its ability to track the cosmic jubilees. We broke the clock, and in doing so, we lost our place on the timeline. We are like tenants living in a decaying, darkened house, completely unaware that the lease has expired, completely deaf to the heavy footsteps of the landlord's enforcers gathering outside the door. We do not know what Jubilee we are living in. We do not know how many fractions of a cycle remain before the heavens split open and the original owner reclaims the title deed of the earth. But while humanity wanders in temporal blindness, the entities operating in the shadows are acutely aware of the time. The Book of Revelation declares that the adversary comes down with great wrath, knowing that his time is short. This is not a metaphor for a generalized sense of urgency. It is a literal, jurisdictional panic. Mastema and his legion of lingering spirits understand the mathematics of the heavenly tablets perfectly. They know exactly when their authorized occupation ends, and as that terminal date approaches, their operations in the material realm have violently accelerated. To recognize the signature of this demonic escalation, we must re-examine the most misunderstood prophecy uttered by Christ in the New Testament. In the Gospel of Matthew, he issues a chilling, precise warning regarding the end of days. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For centuries, modern Christianity has smoothed out the terrifying implications of this verse. Pastors and theologians confidently explain that the days of Noah merely refers to a society that is distracted, a culture that is eating, drinking, marrying, and ignoring the warnings of God until the judgment falls. They reduce the ultimate eschatological warning to a critique of consumerism and moral apathy. But if we view Christ's words through the dark, unredacted lens of the Book of Jubilees, this interpretation is tragically naive. The authors of Jubilees knew exactly what defined the days of Noah, and it was not mere distraction. The days of Noah were defined by the unauthorized descent of the Watchers. They were defined by the catastrophic breach of the barrier separating the immortal from the mortal. They were defined by the horrific systemic genetic manipulation of the biosphere, the splicing of human DNA with the architecture of the fallen host, and the creation of hybrid abominations that the earth could not sustain. The days of Noah were a biological apocalypse, a localized extinction-level event brought about by the weaponization of creation's fundamental codes. When Christ warned that the end of history would mirror the days of Noah, he was not predicting a society that parties too hard. He was predicting the return of the Watchers' technology. He was predicting a generation that would once again cross the impenetrable biological boundaries established by the Creator. And when we look at the trajectory of our modern world, the prophecy is unfolding with terrifying clinical precision. We are no longer merely breaking moral laws. We are dismantling the ontological definitions of life itself. The laboratories of the 21st century have become the new Mount Hermon, the geographical and intellectual high grounds where the modern elite convene to rewrite the source code of humanity. We are actively engaged in the extraction and manipulation of DNA, the building blocks of the divine architecture. We are engineering animal-human chimeras, splicing the genetic material of distinct species in a blatant, arrogant recreation of the exact crimes that summoned the floodwaters. We are aggressively pushing toward transhumanism, attempting to merge the fragile, mortal biology of mankind with the cold, immortal network of artificial intelligence, seeking to achieve eternal life outside of the covenantal boundaries of the Creator. To the secular mind, this is the pinnacle of scientific evolution. But in the hyper-legalistic, unforgiving theology of the Book of Jubilees, this is a multidimensional felony. Every time a genetic boundary is deliberately erased in a sterile laboratory, it is recorded on the heavenly tablets as an act of cosmic treason. We are actively overriding the physical barricades that were established on the first days of Genesis to keep the species separate by altering the blood, by manipulating the nephesh, the biological containment field of the soul. We are altering our spiritual signature. We are making humanity unrecognizable to the protective angels of the presence and highly visible to the predatory entities who feed on the chaos of unauthorized flesh. We are doing precisely what the Nephilim did. We are forcing the universe into an unnatural, hybridized state. And in doing so, we are legally triggering the exact same catastrophic protocols that resulted in the deluge. The ancient legal precedent is already set. The earth cried out against the blood of the giants, and the heavens responded with sterilization. The prophetic warning of the modern era is that the earth is beginning to scream again, groaning under the weight of an engineered, synthetic reality that violates every parameter of the divine mathematics. And this time, the ancient texts warn, the sterilization will not come by water, but by fire. While the scientific elite manipulate the biological layer, Mastema's authorized 10% are systematically harvesting the psychological and societal layers of the human experience. The modern world is gripped by a sudden, inexplicable fragmentation of sanity. We see an explosion of ambient, localized chaos, mass hysteria, the total collapse of objective truth, the sudden, violent tribalism that infects entire populations simultaneously. Psychologists attempt to diagnose this as the result of social media algorithms, economic pressure, or political polarization. But the Book of Jubilees reveals the supernatural infrastructure behind the madness. The demonic realm does not need to manifest as Hollywood monsters. They do not need to levitate beds or speak in backwards Latin to control a population. That is theatrical nonsense. The spirits of the Nephilim are highly intelligent, ancient strategists. They operate by exploiting the fractured frequencies of our broken calendar. Because humanity is entirely out of synchronization with the heavenly modem, we are completely devoid of the spiritual shields that were generated by the synchronized observation of sacred time. We are wide open. These entities function like a dark, invisible algorithm, subtly shifting the parameters of human perception. They amplify our natural anxieties, pushing legitimate grievances into bloodthirsty animosity. They feed on the heavy, dark energy generated by despair, conflict, and the shedding of innocent blood. Mastema is the prosecutor. His goal is not merely to torment humanity, but to continuously build a legal case against us before the throne of God. Every war, every systemic injustice, every moment of global panic is carefully orchestrated and recorded to prove to the Creator that humanity is fundamentally unfit to govern the earth, that we are inherently self-destructive, and that the demonic host should be granted permanent jurisdiction over the ashes of our civilization. As the final Jubilee approaches, the boundaries between the visible and invisible worlds are intentionally being thinned. The erratic, chaotic nature of modern events is not political incompetence. It is the physical world buckling under the localized pressure of descending spiritual entities. The heavens are heavily mobilized. The angels of the presence, the violent elemental forces that govern the winds and the fire, are not resting. They are standing at the absolute edge of the dimensional barrier, awaiting the single mathematical moment, the exact fraction of a second dictated by the unbroken eternal solar calendar. When the final moed is triggered, when that cosmic clock strikes zero, the eviction process will begin. It will not be a peaceful transition of power. It will not be a quiet, invisible rapture that leaves the world undisturbed. The return of divine authority, as described in the ancient esoteric texts, is a violent, catastrophic repossession of stolen property. The heavenly courtroom will be relocated to the physical atmosphere of the earth. The sky will not merely open, it will be rolled back like a scroll. exposing the blinding, radioactive architecture of the divine command center to a terrified humanity. In that moment, the illusions of our modern, secular independence will instantly evaporate. The geopolitical powers, the massive technological infrastructures, and the fortified laboratories of genetic engineering will be exposed as fragile toys standing in the path of a Category 5 metaphysical hurricane. The entities that we summoned through our biological arrogance, the dark spirits that we allowed to manipulate our fractured timeline, will be dragged into the searing light of absolute justice. The Treaty of Mastema will be permanently revoked. The abyss, locked for millennia, will be violently opened to receive the remaining 10% of the lingering host. But for humanity, the arrival of the final Jubilee presents a terror of unimaginable proportions. We will not be judged by the shifting relative moralities of our modern age. We will not be judged by the grace-filled, sanitized theology of the Western ecclesiastical tradition. We will be judged by the exact, unyielding, and mathematically flawless parameters of the heavenly tablets. We will be forced to stand before the angel of the presence, stripped of all our technological armor, answering for every biological boundary we erased, every drop of blood we corrupted, and every appointed time we ignored. We are rushing blindly toward the intersection of dimensions, completely unprepared for the terrifying severity of the returning king, and utterly oblivious to the massive, invisible mechanisms already locking into place beneath our feet. We have spent the last 2,000 years trying to domesticate the divine. We have built theological cages out of stained glass and soft rhetoric, attempting to contain the blinding, terrifying radiation of the Creator within the comfortable, padded boundaries of human emotion. We desperately want a deity who understands our modern nuances, a grandfatherly figure who grades our moral failures on a generous curve and prioritizes our personal happiness over the harsh, unyielding mechanics of universal law. But the Book of Jubilees shatters this arrogant illusion with the kinetic force of a falling star. The God revealed in the ancient desert scrolls does not require your emotional connection. He does not ask for your opinion on the celestial architecture. He is the supreme architect of a militarized mathematical reality, a sovereign who governs an unfathomable hierarchy of elemental terrors and who measures the lifespan of galaxies and the expiration of empires with the exact same cold, flawless precision. To encounter this God is not a comforting spiritual experience. It is a total, annihilating collision with absolute reality. Look closely at the fragility of the mortal condition. You are composed of heavy, decaying matter, a temporary biological vessel walking across a thin crust of dirt that is suspended over a bottomless spiritual abyss. Every breath you draw is borrowed air. Every beat of your heart is a rhythmic countdown dictated by a clock you cannot see, cannot comprehend, and cannot stop. And yet, in our profound, tragic arrogance, we walk through this heavily occupied war zone as if we are the undisputed masters of the universe. We completely ignore the ancient borders. We scoff at the spiritual physics that the Essenes chose to die in the desolate heat of the desert to protect. We eagerly rewrite our own genetic codes. We pollute the spiritual containment field of our blood, and we completely disregard the synchronized rhythms of the cosmic calendar. We genuinely believe that because we have not yet been struck down by celestial fire, the sky above us must be empty, and the throne must be vacant. We mistake the current silence of the heavens for apathy or absence. We assume that because the angels of the presence have not yet torn the sky apart to exact justice, the ancient laws must have been repealed by time and human progress. But in the cold, legal framework of the unseen realm, silence is never an indication of peace. It is the chilling, absolute stillness of a courtroom right before the judge delivers a fatal, irrevocable verdict. The heavenly tablets are not being drafted as we speak. They are completely finished. The ink of destiny is dry. The total summation of human history, the exact moment of your birth, the precise nature of your darkest failures, and the terrifying, unalterable date of the final Jubilee are already permanently engraved in the architecture of the higher dimensions. There is no celestial debate occurring on our behalf. There is no appellate court for the damned. The machinery of the apocalypse is not waiting for our permission to activate. It is simply waiting for the appointed moed, the exact, mathematically guaranteed intersection of time and space when the lease of the earth finally expires and the physical dimensions collapse. To read the Book of Jubilees is to stare directly into the blinding, unforgiving gears of this cosmic clockwork. It is the sudden, horrifying realization that the universe is not a chaotic accident of gas and dust, nor is it a gentle, nurturing mother waiting to embrace us. It is a highly regulated, tightly controlled containment zone, heavily guarded by immortal sentinels who possess absolutely no capacity for human sympathy. They do not operate on grace. They operate purely on jurisdiction. They are the strict enforcers of an ancient, binding contract that humanity breached thousands of years ago. By burying the Book of Jubilees, by altering the measurement of sacred time to fit the politics of emperors and the convenience of modern man, our ancestors did not save us from the terror of the law. They simply blinded us to the approach of the executioner. They systematically removed the warning labels from the high-voltage perimeter of reality, leaving every subsequent generation to wander helplessly into the spiritual crossfire of a war we do not even realize we are fighting. There is no comforting resolution to this investigation. There is no sudden pivot to a message of warm hope. No reassuring theological loophole that guarantees our safety in the approaching dark. The ancient carbonized texts pulled from the caves of Qumran do not offer a life raft for the modern ego. They offer only the crushing existential weight of absolute sovereign severity. We are left standing in the ruins of our own manufactured reality, stripped of our modern technological arrogance, forced to acknowledge the terrifying immensity of the unseen world that surrounds us. The unsleeping sentinels are still watching from the boundaries of the firmament. The rogue, invisible spirits of the Nephilim are still hunting in the fractured frequencies of our broken timeline. The strict legal parameters of the heavenly tablets remain entirely unbroken and unbending, and somewhere, hidden in the silent, terrifying mathematics of a solar calendar we no longer know how to read, the final trumpet is already being raised to the lips of an angel of the presence. The appointed time is locked into the gears of the universe. The countdown is silently bleeding away into the void, and there is absolutely nothing you can do to stop it.